And our next speaker, Sonali Kolhatkar, she's going to be speaking about her unique path to journalism, how others can become real journalists who battle misinformation. Sonali is a journalist, author of Rising Up, The Power of Narrative in Pursuing Racial Justice, and co-author of Bleeding Afghanistan. Sonali's nationally syndicated broadcast program uniquely centers solutions journalism and airs on radio stations and on free speech TV and is supported entirely by subscribers. You can subscribe to her newsletter at risingupwithsonali.com. Risingupwithsonali.com. I'll add that link to the chat. And before you start, Sonali, we had a question in the chat. How are independent journalists paid? So maybe you can touch on that because I believe it's by the subscribers. So with that, take it away, Sonali.
It's like they read my mind because that is precisely what I was going to launch into. But just before I launch into all of that, I just want to echo everything that Jeff said. Jeff is someone who I've trusted and had just such an incredible respect for so many years. And I concur with, Common Dreams is one of my go-tos. I'm trying to get Robert Greenwald on my show to talk about his new film about Palestinian journalists being targeted, Project Censored and Fair have just been stalwarts of our progressive media landscape and ecosystem. And the more that we work together and support one another to uphold progressive values and information, the better. I was just interviewing Mara Einstein recently on my show. She is a former marketing executive who's written a book about viral marketing and cults and called Hoodwinked. And one of the things that she was saying was that the right-wing media is so successful because they all have each other on their shows. They support one another, and not enough people on the left do that, and left media do that. So, and some of us do that, and it's been really powerful for our movement. So how do journalists get paid? Really great question, because I just got laid off. And I want to be a little bit more doom and gloom, even though I'm all about solutions journalism and lifting up the ways in which things are working, compared to what Jeff was saying. Yes, it's true that there's this proliferation of left media, independent media, unbought media. However, there are fewer and fewer and fewer jobs for journalists today. It is a grim, grim landscape. And I very seriously advise young people who are going into journalism today to rethink their career choices. Do not go thinking you're going to graduate to be able to get a good paying job at CNN or wherever, because those jobs are drying up. And it's a very, very serious crisis in our democracy. So I've been kind of a unicorn who has been, up until recently, someone who has almost always had a full-time paid job as a journalist. This is rare in journalism. Never been paid that well, but just about enough to get by. Having a spouse who also works has always helped. But Yes Magazine, that I was working for 4 years, just went under. We lost this huge institution. And part of the problem is, of course, philanthropic outlets, foundations that have a lot of money, who share progressive values, don't fund media very much. They fund campaigns and organizing, which is important, and they fund activists. They just don't fund media very much. I know, because I've looked and looked. There's a few foundations that do, and there's some outlets that get a lot of money, and the vast other groups of journalists and efforts simply don't get that much money. And I think the reason for that is because they feel that the mainstream media, our so-called liberal media, are doing an adequate job. And so, we shouldn't be supporting media. Media should just, be their own industry that covers movements. But the fact is, they don't cover movements. And when they do cover movements, they do it either because they're pushed to, or they do a terrible job of it. Case in point being Black Lives Matter in 2020, the media discovered that there were Black people demanding their rights and organizing for them. But for years before that, the media couldn't even admit this basic slogan, Black Lives Matter, till there was a mass movement on the streets. And then very quickly, for a few months, we had some decent coverage. Very quickly, they pivoted. They put out a lot of misinformation and miscast the slogan, defund the police, made it out to be this radical idea that was just about letting crime go rampant instead of about reinvesting in defunded social institutions that actually keep us safe. So the mainstream media has failed. Philanthropic institutions have failed to support independent journalists. Jobs have dried up. And I remember 4 years ago when I quit KPFK, my previous employer, there were many more jobs out there. I was applying for them. I had several interviews, and I ended up at a place that I really liked. It is no coincidence, nor is it simply ironic, that the moment when we need journalism, good progressive journalism, the most is when there are fewer and fewer opportunities, because predatory capitalism does not like scrutiny. And our mainstream media that are supposedly liberal are very much part and parcel of our predatory capitalist system. And they want to replace journalists with AI. I mean, that is a very, very real situation. They want to replace rank and file on the ground journalists with AI. And of course, the executives will still remain. You have your editors in chief that'll still remain, that will ensure that you don't cast a strong light on billionaires and their agenda. So it is no coincidence that at a time when we need good journalism the most, it is the opportunities for journalists are disappearing. What we're also up against is this plethora, this proliferation of free content that's out there in social media. So majority of Americans get their information from social media. We may not like it, but it's true, right? You see young folks and older folks swiping TikTok, going on Facebook. And what they're up against is this entire sort of gig economy that's developed, where you have social media influencers, viral marketers who have become brand ambassadors, who are putting out information as a way to pull you in, but really they're trying to make a living. That is also no coincidence, because as our economy is failing and more Americans are being pushed out of traditional workforces and workplaces and traditional jobs, they are turning naturally to social media to become brand ambassadors, to make a living, and they're putting out a lot of free content. And the algorithms are being designed to uplift that content. What gets the click and the views and the ad revenues? Rage baiting in content, right? So if you want to grow your followers, which as an independent journalist, I'm constantly trying to grow my followers on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok so that I have an audience that I can put my information out to. And what I'm up against are the folks who are not only putting out only the worst news possible, but conspiracy theories, and who are really lighting this fire under people of things going wrong. And the challenge to that is, even when there is truthful information that's being put out, it's being done so in a way that fuels our cynicism, right? It's being done so in a way that is literally convincing Americans to leave their country. I was just having drinks with a friend yesterday who's an American who's got plans to move to Spain, because she is convinced that we have nothing but fascism left for us in America. We can't outrun our problems. And all we're seeing in our social media feeds is this very cynical sense that fascism is here and there's nothing you can do about it, because they're not uplifting those people who are actually doing something about it. And the mainstream media is not covering, and the algorithms are deprioritizing that. And so we are walking away left wondering, wondering if anyone's solving the problem, and left feeling isolated, left feeling like we just need to escape. And I don't blame folks, right? So we're battling the algorithms, we're battling the fact that the job market is terrible. And so I think that What I'm trying to do is, what a lot of journalists are trying to do, which is basically crowdfunding our jobs. We're crowdfunding our work. So after after Yes crumbled, I tried applying for a few jobs and realized that this basically, most of the jobs out there are for young journalists who are expected to work weekends twice as many hours, fast-paced environment for like a very, very low salary. And frankly, I'm 50 years old. It's not something that I'm not going to work myself to death. I have to pace myself. And it's important for journalists, by the way, to really think about self-care. We are often suffering from secondary trauma from the work that we cover, from the issues that we cover. We internalize the genocides that we cover, and we don't want to burn out. So I'm crowdfunding my own job. I've had this show that I've now been doing in various versions for more than 20 years. And I have a little bit of a following, in spite of the algorithmic bias. And so I've started an effort to just get subscribers to subscribe for $4 a month to join in, and they'll get the access to all of my interviews, transcripts. And I'm focusing on solutions journalism, which was a really important lesson I learned at Yes, which is that it's not about putting a positive spin on the news, because frankly, look, we're all screwed, right? Like, are we living in a world where things are going really, really badly? That doesn't mean that people aren't doing something about it. And if we can have journalism that inspires people to take action rather than fueling their cynicism and fueling their disengagement, because who is that benefiting? That's only benefiting the fascists to be disengaged. If we can have journalism that uplifts the solutions, that showcases, look, there's some young people here who are protesting, for against the Gaza genocide. Look, there's a group of people here who are electing a socialist to their city council. We can be inspired to do more of that, and we can remain engaged and not check out, because the whole point of journalism is to strengthen our democracy. It's not a glamorous field. It's not something that you get, you earn big bucks doing. And if you are earning a lot of big bucks doing it, I sort of wonder I sort of wonder who you're serving in this landscape. I want journalists to do well. I want to do well. But the only way to earn a lot of money and get some big accolades in this day and age is to fuel the cynicism, fuel conspiracy theories, join the mainstream. And so what I'm hoping is that people across the country understand that we need journalists. Journalists have to eat. Journalists can and should be uplifting solutions to our crises so that we can all remain engaged. So I came to journalism from science. My background is in physics and astronomy. I went to school for astronomy. I had this very sort of, gauzy idea of being an academic. And I quickly learned that I wanted to do something more meaningful in my life. And I took my background in education and became a journalist. And it turns out having a science education is excellent for being a journalist, because the idea is that you're synthesizing the news and you're learning truth from fiction, and you understand statistics and you understand how systems work. And I've been in community media my whole life, and now I'm basically in the crowdfunding model of trying to get people to support the work that I do. And I'll just leave you with one last thought. The idea that we are expecting journalists to do so much for so little is something that we should push back on. Let me tell you what I do. If I can get, if I get 2,000 people subscribing $4 a month, $4 a month, right? That's very little. $4 a month, I would be able to sustain a weekly 1-hour program that has 3 video, radio, and transcribed interviews. How is that even possible? It's because I'm doing it all. I'm booking my own interviews. I'm doing the research, writing the script, recording the interviews live to tape with a teleprompter in one hand, B-roll, live production in the other, editing them, mixing it together, uploading it, creating clips for social media, posting it to Free Speech TV, sending it out to radio stations, finding time to fundraise, raising 2 children, taking care of my parents who live in my backyard. And it's a lot. It's a lot. So I don't say this to think, to sort of impress you, other than to think that this shouldn't, like many people wouldn't be able to do what I do. I'm only able to do it because I've learned these skills over many, many years and can be very efficient. And I think about the young journalists who aren't going to, be able to do this, and we're going to slip out of the field, and we will all be suffering for it, because the fewer journalists we have, the less healthy our democracy. So anyway, so just to wrap up, support journalists, lift up solutions journalism, don't disengage. If you and try not to consume media that depresses you, because there is a growing sector of journalism that focuses on solutions. Try to seek that out if you find yourself getting really depressed and traumatized, and feeling like then nothing's going right and all you want to do is run away to Canada or Europe or wherever, right? So that's all I leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Yeah, I don't get stuck doom scrolling, because right now my Twitter feed is just all the worst news every day you can imagine, so it's tough. I have a lot of questions for you, Sonali, but we're going way over, so I'm not and you answered, so I was going to ask you about AI in journalism and you got to that. I was going to ask you about crowdfunding a career and you literally said that. So, I guess the big question I get to is, can truth, something you're trying to share, compete with profit driven media? Or is there something else that has to be done? What I mean by that is the conspiracy theorists, the radical, we know what gets clicked is the most controversial, wild stuff. The same way that in campaigns, the politician with the wildest thing to say gets the most donations. That's what the platforms want. That's what the algorithms want. So what do we, how do we use truth and honesty? Do we need the audience to, what do we do?
We have to be creative. We have to be really, really creative. I'll tell you, I'll just give you one example. I'm writing my appeal for next week on my subscriber list to get people who have signed up for free to convert to paid subscriptions. And I know that the things that get the clicks are when you're against something, right? So if you're against something and you put that out there, that's what gets the clicks. And so I decided I'll write an appeal about being against the algorithm that deprioritizes solutions journalism, that deprioritizes joy and successes and models of challenging fascism. And so we have to get creative. And it turns out there's a lot of people who are really, really creative. There's like stand-up comics who are doing incredible work, who are doing political work, who are doing political analysis, and they're able to find ways to defeat the algorithm. There's people inside Gaza who are filming themselves. I mean, and TikTok is a bit of a crapshoot, and you can get some of the worst impulses on TikTok, as well as some of the best. So look for those people who are doing incredible things. For example, look up the twins in Gaza. These two guys, they're twin brothers, and they do these incredible videos, and they show you what life in Gaza is like, and they've got tons of followers because they know how to do it creatively. We have to get creative.